I prepared 10 questions for this homework. Let's start with question 1. First question. Who are Britain's invaders and what are their effects on the country? Britain's oldest known human findings date back 250,000 with 300,000 years. The Ice Age period was first experienced and lasted about 50,000 years. Then people start living in small groups. Their population gradually increased, so society began to form. They fed by farming and hunting. Later, the Stone Age and Bronze Age occurred, but still Britain was not fully formed. A certain community was formed in Stone Age, and this community was Celts. In fact, not all of them came from England, but some of them came from Europe and formed this community, and gradually they multiplied and formed Celtic tribes. This society is a warrior society. The belief of that era was also a belief called Druidism. After Britain grows and develops, invasion of the Romans, which has the most precise dates known in history, takes place. The first invasion of Britain was made by the Romans and in 55 BCE. Here the Romans integrate their culture. Celts are effects and influence of their culture begins to wane. The dominance of the Romans gradually increases. The greatest contribution of the Romans to Britain was culture. After a while, the influence of the Romans to Britain decreases, they withdraw. Another known date is the date when the Anglo-Saxons settled in Britain, formed 445. The Anglo-Saxons had a pagan culture when they first arrived, so the community here is also influenced by this culture. The Anglo-Saxons were also a belligerent society. This society was more influential in rural areas because the English society based on agriculture was formed during this period. Towards the end of the 8th century, the Scandinavians arrived in Britain. This community was called the Vikings, and they were slightly different from the other invaders or tribes. They had the ability to use the sea route to fish. At first, they were welcomed differently by society because it was a culture they were not used to. The reason the Vikings invasion was effective and successful, because the Anglo-Saxons or British soldiers were not as capable as Vikings. The most famous date in history, after the influence of the Vikings also waned, is the invasion of the Normans in 1066. Britain has conquered under the leadership of the William the Conqueror. Since the Romans did not go to Scotland, he creates a new feudal system. Churches are great importance of this system because the people believed in religious motives and William used it. Question 2. Why is England more dominant than other countries? Why does England come to mind first? Britain has always been more dominant than in other countries. It is more dominant than others, both culturally and linguistically. The origin of the language, culture, and policy system used now in England, Britain has applied economic and military powers to other countries. There are other reasons. For example, the country's money is controlled by Bank of England. Money also means power and economy, so it is one of the important reasons. At the same time, the royal family is in England. The other three countries had never had Elizabeth I. That's why the kings and queens who come in sequel are also in England. If we go back to ancient history, Anglo-Saxons who now from original England called the island of the Englands. The name also means England in Old English. At the same time, their culture was influential as the Anglo-Saxons formed the original of the history of Britain has also be a more dominant country as its culture outweighs that of other countries. There are a lot of reasons for that. Previously, Ireland and Scotland have raised their head. They wanted to independence and work on this path. Question 3. What makes Ireland see itself as more important than Britain? At the time, what is the reason why Ireland considers itself friends with Italy? Because the Anglo-Saxons came to the island from Europe, their people switched from pagan culture to Christianity. Churches are established on the islands and pastors are brought from Europe. Saint Patrick comes to Ireland from Europe. It introduced Christianity to the people of Ireland. He will be the pastor of there. After a while, the Irish people accepts Christianity thanks to the Saint Patrick. In other words, Ireland accepts Christianity before the England. In fact, the first Irish on the island accepts Christianity. After Ireland, Saint Augustine also introduced Christianity to the Scots. Those who accept second Christianity become Scots. The last time England converted to Christianity, that's why the Irish see themselves as pioneers. In fact, the most important and dominant force on the island is England, but the Irish considers themselves more important because England accepts Christianity last time. Some of the Romans came to the islands from Italy. Actually, Christianity spreads around here. It's influenced on spreads of Italy of enormous pastors who come to Ireland and Scotland are also Roman ambassadors. Since Ireland is also a country that adopts this religion early, they both consider themselves superior to England and consider themselves friends with Italy. Irish before. What is the difference between Highland and Lowland? What is its significance to Britain and the society that lives there? Britain has divided into two best-known regions. One is Highlands, and this area is made up of Wales, most of Scotland, northern England, and southwestern England. Highlands does not actually include mountainous areas like the name. In the Highlands region, there is a literary emphasis on more mass pastoralism because the air is warm and suitable for agriculture. Agriculture is at the forefront. Highlands has the denser population than lowland. Lowland has more fertile land. The most fertile land places are usually found in the south and southeast of Britain. Lowlanders are more interested in agriculture and animal husbandry. Lowlanders live in villages, while Highlanders live in nomadic or small areas. The biggest difference is that Scottish culture plays a leading role. In the invasions of Britain, the Highlands less affected than the lowlands. This is because the lowlanders live in nomadic, so their culture was constantly affected. Wherever they were influenced by the culture there. At the same time, because the Highlanders were also interested in agriculture, the place where they live remained constantly, so they were little affected. Highlanders are more prominent culturally and linguistically. They are more connected to their culture because with each new invaders, new cultures appear the lowlands and then spread in the highlands. Question 5. What is the reason why the Romans were so influential in conquering Britain? What are the ways they use and follow? The Romans settled in Britain in small groups. First, they share their own culture and lifestyle. They introduce their language and to the public here. Using time, they gradually Romanized the Britons. The southern part of Britain is most affected. The military control of the Romans is also in the south of part. In fact, it has been very effective for them to settle small groups and introducing themselves to the public here. Because while they seem harmless from the outside, they actually gradually manage to impress to the public. The greatest contribution of the Romans is their culture. They have also managed to reduce the Celtic influence in Britain. The island is moving into a new modern life thanks to the Romans. Although Celtic influence has decreased, the Scots continue the tribal system. The Romans initially collaborated with the Celtic aristocracy. Later, the British aristocracy also Romanized, were also Romanized. So the cultures mix and society changed. The reason the Romans were so effective is that they actually influenced a colonial power policy. This policy is that they actually settled in the islands in small groups and integrate their culture to the people here. In this way, the Romans formed the future of the island, and they actually shaped the island by integrating their culture. This policy of the Romans is so strong that even when they leave the island, the influence of the culture to Roman, of the life to people on the island continues. Question 6. Who is Queen Boudicca, and why did she resist to Romans? Why, after the defeat of Boudicca, the British leaders and upper classes became Romanized, while the lower classes were the least affected by Romans? She is the queen of the Iceni tribes. The Romans resist them when they reach London. She doesn't want to fall under influence of the Romans. When the Romans first arrived, they settled here and tried to integrate their culture. She wants London to be independent, and she joined the forces of the Celtic women and used them against the Romans, because at that time and in a pagan culture, women were so trained as a warrior. She wants to remove the power of independence. Because at that time and in a pagan culture, women were so trained as warriors. She wants to remove the Romans from the Britain, not just for her own revenge. She is resisting, but she is failing. Yet, Boudicca is often referred to as a symbol of independence and honor. After the defeat of Boudicca, the Romans began to settle truly in Britain, a very certain difference occurs in the upper classes and lower classes. The upper classes embrace Roman culture more. Roman influence in the lower classes is minimal. They worship the upper class Roman gods and the empire. They have had extreme commitments. In the lower class, Romans Celtic tribe temples are common, while the upper class was more open to innovation and change. The lower class continue its own culture. Both Celtic and Latin were spoken in the country, so the two cultures became mixed. While the lower class wanted to adhere its own culture, the upper and ruling classes were also interested in Romanization. Question 7. What are the contributions of the Anglo-Saxons to Britain? The Anglo-Saxons came to the Britain with large communities from Europe. They settled in rural areas in the southern part of the country. The influence of the Anglo-Saxons in the countryside is enormous. They developed the countryside. They set up new farming methods. They built self-sufficient villages. So they produced their own food themselves without help. Thanks to these efforts, rural areas change and develop. Through agriculture, they formed an agrarian British society. Their contributions is not just that. After the Anglo-Saxons, who were of Germanic origin, arrived in England in the 5th century, they gradually formed the beginning of England. After the period of settlement, that is in the 11th century, Christianity completely spread. In fact, here they show their religious beliefs to the people here. One of the most important is that they formed the original British society. The original white British is the Anglo-Saxons. The word England also means land of Angles in Old English. In summary, they developed Britain, established their lifestyle and culture, and developed agriculture. Question 8. How the British class system emerged? The Normans invaded Britain in 1066. They settled here and communicate with the public. The strict feudal system begins to be implemented. Nobles or upper classes were directly responsible to the king. Those with less authorities were also accountable to the upper classes. At the bottom were the villagers, and they had some responsibilities and duties. They were not even allowed to travel without permission, and this lower class was responsible for those who were above themselves. The villagers still bore traces Anglo-Saxon culture. They were Anglo-Saxon speaking Englishmen. The upper class was influenced by the Norman. They adopt the Norman language. In this way, the British class system began. This strict system formed by the Normans gradually gets in order. It becomes the greatest force, the influence of Britain. In the following years, this order reverted to the British monarchy. Question 9. How did the Vikings arrive in Britain and the reaction of those in the country? What is the contribution of the sea power to the Vikings? They arrived in Britain from Scandinavia towards the end of the 8th century. This community is called the Vikings. It is the first community to attack southeastern England. They are not welcomed when they first come to the country, because their culture is very different from that of the Anglo-Saxons. But they are religiously similar to the Anglo-Saxons. So both society have a pagan culture. At the same time, the difference in lifestyle has also been effective, because when it comes to a society that is more different from the lifestyle you are familiar with, you are strange. As warlike as the Anglo-Saxons are, they are not as skilled as the Vikings. Vikings are professional about war. They use horses for transportation. Vikings grow and become a powerful society. They attacked eastern and northern England, as did the Anglo-Saxons before. But the Vikings were more successful because they were closer to the North Sea. Question 10. What are the causes and consequences of the Magna Carta? John, the king of that era, was not very popular in the country, because he was just passing on his wishes and orders. There was no mention about barons or people. The people were being crushed by King John. Several barons who were large landowners united and negotiated with King John. for the freedom and equality of the people. If the king did not agree to this, a civil war could ensue. Then, while the barons who opposed this situation were ill at worst, their numbers suddenly increased. They start civil war and revolted with the people. That's all my presentation. Thanks for listening to me. I hope you like it.